My name is Caleb Monroe. I'm 36, and for the past 9 years, I've lived as the accessory no one asked for in a family that thrives on appearances. My wife, Celeste, is the golden daughter of the Monroe family legacy, lawyers, architects, polished perfection packaged in tailored suits and practiced smiles. I, on the other hand, own a mid-sized electrical contracting firm. I built it from the ground up. No inheritance, no leg-ups, just long hours, burned fingers, and enough persistence to turn a van and a dream into something real. But real isn't what they value. Not her parents, not her sister, not anyone with a Monroe bloodline. At family events, I was always the one asked to take photos, never to be in them. Caleb, you've got the longest arms, grab a group shot for us? Every time. Like I was the tripod that came with the marriage. When I tried to include myself once, her mother, Lorraine, gave me a tight smile and said, maybe just one of the family for this one. The implication? I wasn't. Celeste would laugh it off. They're just old school, she'd say, brushing her fingers through my hair. They don't mean anything by it. But they did. Every time her father introduced me as Caleb, the handyman, at formal dinners. Every time someone asked me to fix the porch light at a birthday party without ever saying hello. Every time Celeste failed to correct them. It was small, sharp paper cuts over years, and you start bleeding without realizing how deep it goes. So when her sister Danielle announced her engagement and invited us to her wedding, I wasn't holding my breath for a change. The invitation arrived on creamy cardstock, with embossed gold lettering in a hand-addressed envelope, our names printed together, but somehow still separate. Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Monroe, it read, but I knew better. They weren't inviting me. They were inviting her, and I just happened to be attached. The wedding weekend loomed like a dentist appointment, something I had to endure, not enjoy. Celeste was excited. She had her dress picked out a month in advance, a floor-length navy gown with a slit that made her look like royalty. You'll wear your gray suit, right? She asked, smoothing a wrinkle in my jacket as we got ready that morning. It brings out your eyes. I smiled and nodded. Not because I cared about the suit, but because I cared about her. I should have known better. The moment we pulled into the Vineyard estate, I felt it, the weight of class and curated elegance pressing down like humidity before a storm. Valets in black vests whisked away our car. A trio of musicians played something soft and stringed near the hedges. Guests mingled in crisp linen and heirloom pearls. Celeste was instantly absorbed into the crowd, kissed on both cheeks, pulled into laughter and champagne toasts. And me? I trailed behind like an extra in someone else's movie. The planner greeted us near the reception tent with a clipboard and a practiced smile. Name? She asked, scanning the list without really looking at me. Caleb Monroe, I said, clearing my throat. She paused, then tapped her pen and smiled again, tighter this time. Oh yes, here you are. You're in the spouse section. She gestured toward the far edge of the tent. Right over there. I followed her finger and saw it. A line of basic folding chairs, thin, gray, slightly wobbly, placed near the side exit where the breeze carried the smell of the nearby trash bins. It's just for extended guests, she added, already turning away. Extended. Not family. Not guest of honor. Not even by marriage. Just extra. I looked back at the main seating area, where elegant name cards marked reserved spots for close family and friends. Near the bridal table, I saw him, Julian. Celeste's ex. Of course he was invited. Of course he was seated at the heart of it all, laughing with her, one hand resting on the back of her chair like he still belonged there. She was smiling, leaning in slightly. He whispered something. She laughed. And me? I stood at the edge of the celebration, holding an envelope that held more than a card. It held the check I wrote to cover part of the lighting for this entire event. My name wasn't on the program. My contribution wasn't acknowledged. But I paid to make this place glow. I took a breath. Then another. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. Numb in that specific way you get when humiliation becomes too familiar, like an old coat you keep wearing because it still fits. I walked to the folding chair and sat, my hands resting on the envelope, my eyes fixed on a family that never once chose me. And somewhere between the music and the murmurs of a celebration I wasn't truly a part of, something settled in my chest. Not resentment. Not yet. Just awareness. I didn't belong here. And maybe, finally, I was done pretending I did. I stayed in that chair longer than I should have. The metal felt cold through my suit pants, and it creaked every time I shifted. A small folding chair near the trash bins, that was their version of hospitality. I looked around. watching the polished symphony of a Monroe wedding unfold like a carefully rehearsed play. Wine glasses clinked under chandeliers suspended from the tent ceiling. Guests in pastel designer gowns floated through the venue like curated brushstrokes on a portrait. Everyone had a place, a role, a label that defined their importance. Mine? Spouse section. Side exit. Disposable. The envelope sat on my lap, a little too thick for a standard card. I had included a check inside, $5,000. Not a last-minute gift, but something I'd thought about, planned for. I'd even met with the lighting vendor myself weeks ago to design the layout of the vineyard's walkways and ensure the floral arches had enough illumination for the couple's golden hour photos. All on me. All with the intention of being generous, respectful, useful. I told myself it would mean something. It didn't. From my folding chair, I could see the full display, the twinkle lights tracing the vineyard rows, the glow from the arch where the bride and groom would stand, and the soft wash of amber uplighting that made the venue look like it had been dipped in honey. All of it had my fingerprints. But no one saw that. No one cared. Not even Celeste, who hadn't looked in my direction since we arrived. I spotted her standing close to Julian, her college ex. He had always been the kind of guy her family adored. White collar, Ivy League, charming in a way that made you feel like he was always rehearsing a speech for someone more important. He wore a tailored tan suit and leaned casually on the cocktail table, like he was born to be admired. And Celeste? She was glowing, laughing. She leaned in as he spoke, her hand brushing his arm like old times. Like I was the old news left by the coat rack. The planner brushed past me again, offering a tight, professional nod, then pivoted before I could speak. Even the servers barely made eye contact, passing trays of hors d'oeuvres to other guests while I sat next to a garbage bin that smelled faintly of wilted roses and half-eaten quiche. It wasn't about the seat. It never was. It was about what the seat represented. It was about where they placed me in their world, on the fringe, behind the curtain, out of focus. I looked at the envelope again. I imagined Danielle opening it after the honeymoon, reading the card I had handwritten, seeing the check inside. Would she even know it came from me? Or would it be shrugged off as another generous gesture from Celeste's husband? I stood. The motion was quiet, measured. I didn't say a word. I straightened my jacket, slipped the envelope into my inner pocket, and started walking toward the heart of the celebration. The chatter dimmed as I passed through the tent. People noticed. Their eyes followed me, subtle but curious. I moved through clusters of family friends, past her cousins, past her father, who raised a glass in my direction like I was the waiter topping off the champagne. No words. No nods. Just that look. Like I was trespassing on a scene not meant for me. When I reached the floral arch, I paused. A few heads turned. Celeste finally noticed. Her expression froze mid-laugh, her lips parted as if unsure whether to smile or frown. Julian's hand fell from her arm. Danielle, in her gown, looked confused, one hand still clutching her bouquet. And I said it. Real family doesn't pay for this. That was all. The music didn't stop, but something else did. That buzz of conversation. That background hum of contentment. It flatlined. I turned and walked out, not in anger, not in some grand tantrum, but in perfect clarity. For the first time in years, I felt grounded. Not vengeful, awake. No one followed me. No one called after me. The world behind me continued, the orchestra picking up its tempo, the wedding carrying on as if I had been a dream someone chose to forget. Outside, I took a long breath. The air smelled different here, crisper, quieter. I walked to my car, loosened my tie, and sat in the driver's seat with the door open, the envelope still resting in my jacket. And still nothing. No text. No call. Not from Celeste. Not from anyone. Which told me everything I needed to know. 10 minutes. That's how long I sat on that folding chair before something cracked. Not loud. Not violent. Just a clean, quiet snap inside me, like a cable pulled too tight for too long. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound, but changes everything. I kept my posture straight, hands folded over the envelope on my lap, watching the celebration unfold as if I were behind a glass wall. My seat faced the side of the reception tent, angled perfectly for a view of the dumpsters and the portable toilets. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who paid for the venue's entire lighting arrangement had been gifted a front row seat to the trash. My gaze drifted past the glittering chandeliers and over to the bridal table, where the real celebration thrived. Her family, elegant and oblivious, raised glasses to toasts I couldn't hear. Danielle's new husband looked dazed but happy, caught in the warmth of his new in-laws' embrace. The Monroe family loved hard, just not when it came to me. I spotted Celeste again. This time, her head was thrown back in laughter, her hand casually resting on Julian's shoulder. Julian, of course. He had the Monroe pedigree. Ivy League. Wealth management. Played lacrosse, or was it polo? He wasn't just accepted by her family. He was expected. When I came along, I wasn't a fit. I was a glitch. Celeste never said it outright. She didn't have to. It was in the way she corrected me in front of her mother. In how she hesitated to bring me to her firm's galas, saying, "It's more of a networking thing than a spouse thing." In the way she avoided using the word husband in social circles where status was currency. My hand curled around the envelope. Inside was the card. I'd taken time writing it, too much time. A full paragraph about how proud I was of Danielle and how honored I felt to contribute something meaningful to her special day. I had even signed it with warmth. With love, Caleb. Like I believed love meant something in this equation. The check inside? $5,000. That was 3 full days of work for my team. I didn't just pay out of pocket. I pulled strings, cut margins, and stayed late wiring test runs at the vendor's warehouse. I had made sure every wire, every beam, every flicker of light in that tent was flawless. Not because I needed thanks, but because I thought being dependable might earn me a place at the table. I didn't want applause. I just wanted respect. I glanced down at the envelope again. Then I stood. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one slow, measured rise. The scraping sound of the folding chair's metal legs against the stone patio was the only noise I made. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and slipped the envelope into the inner pocket of my blazer. No one saw me stand. No one cared that I walked. Until I passed through the rows of tables, the hush started to spread. A few people paused mid-conversation. Celeste's cousin turned her head. A waiter stepped aside quickly, unsure if he should say something. Even the photographer paused, camera lens tilting as I approached the floral arch near the main table. The arch I designed, lit by the equipment I paid for, highlighted with amber LEDs chosen specifically to make Danielle's champagne-colored gown glow. Celeste saw me. She stopped laughing. Julian stepped back slightly. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply looked at her, and then past her, to the people gathered, the ones who never saw me but always took from me. And I said, calm and clear, real family doesn't pay for this. Then I walked. Silence followed me like a shadow. I didn't look back. The air outside the tent was cool, almost bracing. It hit my lungs like truth. I crossed the gravel path, my footsteps steady, and reached my car parked along the edge of the vineyard. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, door cracked open. The soft hum of music floated from the tent, muffled and distant now. Still no call. No message. Not even a glance from Celeste. I pulled the envelope from my pocket and rested it on the dashboard. It sat there like a forgotten artifact, proof of my effort, my belief that generosity would buy dignity, that a check could secure belonging. It hadn't. And sitting in that silence, it occurred to me. They never forgot to seat me properly. They didn't overlook me. They placed me exactly where they thought I belonged. That's what cracked. Not my ego. Not my pride. My illusion. I thought love could bridge the gap between being accepted and being tolerated. I thought being useful could turn into being valued. I was wrong. I left the venue behind and drove home, not in anger, but in clarity. Let them drink champagne under my lights. They just watched the man who paid for it walk away. I expected her to call. Somewhere between pulling into my apartment's garage and taking off my tie, I thought I'd hear the vibration. A message. A missed call. Something. But my phone stayed silent. Not a ping. Not even a calendar alert. I placed it on the counter and stared at it for a full minute, like it might light up just because I wanted it to. But nothing came. I stood there in the kitchen, the overhead bulb casting harsh light on my granite counter. It was a rented space, sleek, modern, impersonal. We were in between homes, Celeste and I, supposedly looking for a place to settle after years of temporary apartments. But that search had slowed when her firm picked up a new client. She'd thrown herself into work, and I threw myself into staying out of the way. I took off my jacket and laid it gently on the bar stool. The envelope was still in the inside pocket. I didn't pull it out. I already knew what was in it. I already knew what it meant. By midnight, there was still no call. Not from Celeste. Not from Danielle. Not even from her parents. I didn't expect a thank you. but I had at least expected outrage, a scolding, a demand for an explanation, something to validate the fact that I'd left her sister's wedding mid-reception. But silence? That said more than words ever could. The next morning, my phone finally rang. But it wasn't Celeste. It was her cousin Michelle. I hesitated before answering, not sure what I'd hear. "Hey," she whispered like she was calling from a confessional booth. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. No one had asked me that in months. "I'm fine," I said. "You sound like you're in hiding." "I am," she replied. "I'm in the pantry at the hotel brunch." Danielle's crying. "Your exit?" "It's everywhere." "Everywhere." Someone posted it on Instagram. "You walking out. The line you said. It's going viral. Real family doesn't pay for this." "It's on TikTok now." Of course it was. I could picture it. Guests sipping champagne while secretly recording me from behind centerpieces, uploading it before dessert. And now I was a meme. A headline. A moment. "Are they mad?" I asked. "Oh yeah," Michelle whispered. "Danielle's parents are furious. Your name's basically forbidden at the brunch." Celeste hasn't said much. I stayed silent for a moment. "I thought she'd at least text me," I said. Michelle sighed. "She hasn't looked at her phone. Just keeps saying, he'll come around. He's dramatic sometimes." Dramatic. I was the man who'd paid for half their lighting, who got seated by the garbage, and I was dramatic. "Thanks for the call," I said. "I'm sorry, Caleb," Michelle added before hanging up. "For all of it." I stared at the screen after she ended the call. Her apology wasn't grand. It didn't fix anything. But it was the first honest thing anyone from Celeste's side had offered in a long time. I didn't feel angry. I felt awake. Like someone had turned on a light in a room I didn't know was dark. The silence wasn't a pause. It was a verdict. No one rushed to defend me. No one scrambled to apologize. No one said, "We didn't mean it." Because they did mean it. Every seating arrangement. Every conversation I was excluded from. Every cold smile and backhanded compliment. They didn't value me. They valued what I gave them. My skills. My money. My silence. And now that I'd broken that silence, they had nothing left to say. I walked over to the window and looked out across the city. I could see the roof line of buildings I had helped wire. Projects I'd been called in to fix when no one else could. That was my legacy, quiet work, solid craftsmanship, things that lasted. But I had let that identity bleed into my personal life. I let myself become a background character in my own marriage. Celeste once said I had a gift for not taking up space. She meant it as a compliment. I was easy, low maintenance, chill, as she liked to say. The kind of man who didn't cause scenes, who kept the peace, who always fixed what was broken. But in her world, silence wasn't peace, it was permission. And for years, I'd been giving them permission to treat me like I didn't matter. Not anymore. I picked up my phone again, not to call, but to scroll. I found the Instagram video Michelle mentioned. It wasn't long. 15 seconds, maybe. A shaky clip of me standing at the arch, saying my line, and walking out. The comments were what got me. "This guy's a legend. Low-key respect. He paid and got disrespected? I'd have done worse." There were hundreds, maybe thousands, and none of them knew me. But somehow they saw me. For the first time, I saw myself too. Not as the outsider, but as the man who finally spoke up. By the second day, the silence became strategy. Not mine, hers. Still no call. No text. Not even a "where are you?" or a "what the hell, Caleb?" The Celeste I married would have had a spreadsheet of arguments ready by now. But this Celeste? She was calculating, waiting to see if I'd crawl back with an apology in hand and excuses dripping from my mouth. She thought she still held the upper hand. She didn't. Because what no one on her side of the aisle knew, not her parents, not Danielle, not even Celeste herself, was how much influence I had over the wedding they just threw. They thought I was the guy who wired light switches, the vendor whisperer, the discount magician, the silent contributor. What they didn't realize was I had built an invisible scaffolding under that entire event. I didn't need to yell. I just needed to pull one thread. So I made a few polite calls. Not threats. Not demands. Just questions. I asked Marcus, the lighting vendor, if he'd received the final installment from Danielle's planner. He hadn't. I told him to hold off. I'd personally guaranteed it, and without confirmation from me, I asked him to pause all follow-up services. No arch dismantling, no breakdown labor, no complimentary keepsake box of Edison bulbs. Then I called Jasmine from the AV team. the one who'd stayed late during the rehearsal dinner to balance the mic levels for the officiant. She had already prepped a wedding video teaser for Danielle's Instagram page. I asked her to hold the edit, just for a bit. She owed me favors. I was the one who helped her land a contract with a hotel downtown, after all. Next was Thomas from Champagne and Company. They'd agreed to sponsor a limited supply of vintage bottles for the post-wedding brunch in exchange for a social media campaign. Through me, I pulled the agreement. No champagne. Then I reached out to Natalie, the freelance photographer, who was supposed to send Danielle's wedding album by the end of the week. I asked her to pause the delivery. Said there were unresolved vendor disputes. Which wasn't exactly a lie. I was a vendor, and I was very much unresolved. None of them pushed back. They knew me, trusted me, worked with me for years. In this business, professionalism wasn't just contracts, it was character. And mine had always been solid. They didn't know the whole story, but the tone in my voice was enough. They could tell something was off. By Friday, the dominoes started falling. I got a message from Jasmine. Danielle's planner is calling nonstop. Said they need the highlight reel for a family screening. You want me to tell them you pulled the plug? No, I replied. Tell them there's a technical delay. An hour later, Marcus texted me a screenshot, an angry email from Danielle's mother demanding a refund on the lighting due to mismanagement and vendor interference. I just smiled. I wasn't being cruel. I was being deliberate. For years, I let them use my talents, my contacts, my time. And in return, they gave me the folding chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't burn down their tent. I just stopped carrying their weight. It was amazing how fast things fell apart when I let go. Danielle's wedding had been an Instagram fantasy, carefully curated aesthetics, a family photo every hour, hashtags like hashtag Monroe Moments and hashtag Danielle Ever After. But the facade had a fragile foundation. All it took was one man pulling his quiet support for the cracks to show. Saturday morning, Michelle called again. They're in full panic mode, she said, trying to keep her voice down. Danielle's crying about her wedding album being held hostage. Celeste is pacing like a madwoman. And your name, Caleb, it's now a curse word in this family. I chuckled. That's new. At least they're saying it. Julian's trying to play peacemaker, but it's just making things worse. He keeps reminding everyone he offered to help with the lighting, but was politely declined. Celeste's mom almost threw her mimosa at him. That made me laugh for real. Michelle's voice softened. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you do this sooner? Speak up, I mean. I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I hadn't ever said it out loud. I kept thinking things would change, I said. That if I just kept helping, kept giving, they'd eventually see me, value me. And now I know they only saw what I could offer, not who I was. She was quiet for a moment, then said, well, they see you now, whether they like it or not. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment with the envelope still unopened on the coffee table. It had become a symbol, proof of the transaction that never should have happened. Proof that I thought money could buy my seat at the table. Now I was rewriting the rules. Not through shouting. Not through drama. Just quiet consequences. The kind that echo louder than applause ever could. Her message came in at 10:17 p.m., exactly 5 days after I walked out of Danielle's wedding. Celeste, you overreacted. It wasn't about you. That was it. No greeting. No question about how I was doing. Just a 7-word text, like a slap dressed up as a conversation starter. I stared at it for a few seconds, wondering if maybe the message was incomplete. Maybe a follow-up would land with a softening clause or some hint of remorse. But it never came. So I responded with a photo. I had taken a picture of the seating chart the moment I saw it. I hadn't even known why at the time, just a quiet instinct. It showed my name, not beside hers, not even at a family-adjacent table, but under a different category entirely. Extra guest, Caleb, spouse. No title. No last name. No identity. Just a parenthetical add-on. Like I was a +1 someone forgot to remove from a spreadsheet. I hit send and didn't wait for a reply. She read it. The notification popped up. Seen. Then, nothing. That nothing was louder than any apology could have been. I turned off my phone and went to bed early that night, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about how effortless it was for her to dismiss me. How fast she could condense years of marriage into "it wasn't about you." If not me, who was it about? The next morning, Michelle called again, her voice practically buzzing with new gossip. Julian's bragging, she said without even saying hello. He's telling people Celeste always kept the door open for him. My stomach tightened. What door? Exactly. He told someone at the brunch that she once said, and I quote, "If things ever fall apart, you'll be my what if." Caleb, people heard it. I sat in stunned silence, gripping the edge of the table. What do you want me to do with that? Michelle asked. Should I say something? No, I said. Let him talk. He's doing the work for me. Later that afternoon, I opened my social media app for the first time in days and uploaded a single image. It was a photo of me standing at the lighting warehouse, one foot propped on a coiled extension cable, holding the event invoice in my hand. Across the bottom of the invoice in bold red ink were the words "Paid in full by C. Monroe." No caption, just a line I'd been rehearsing all morning. For the family who couldn't find me a seat. I hit post and locked my phone. I didn't need to watch the numbers rise. I already knew. By evening, it had gone viral, at least in our circle. I got messages from friends, old coworkers, even a few mutuals from Celeste's side. Respect. Long overdue. About time someone said it. And then the comments came from people I hadn't heard from in years. A former vendor. Man, I remember how you saved that winter gala with 3 hours notice. They never gave you credit for that either. A DJ I once covered a cancellation fee for. You gave us a playbook, Caleb. Classy, sharp, quiet power. Even Celeste's Aunt Valerie. Yes, the same one who once called me the electrician guy at Thanksgiving, left a comment on the post. This explains a lot. That one stuck with me. Because it wasn't just a response. It was an acknowledgement. An admission that maybe they'd all been complicit in the treatment I'd quietly endured. And now, by removing my silence, I had made the invisible visible. By the next day, Danielle had lost her catering refund. One of the vendors canceled their thank you brunch appearance because of communication breakdowns. Her wedding planner posted a vague but pointed Instagram story about clients who burn bridges before the ink dries. I didn't engage. I didn't have to. The golden couple, Celeste and Julian, suddenly had tarnish. Julian's brag had made it to someone else's ears, specifically his current girlfriend's. Apparently, she didn't take it well. Michelle told me she was last seen throwing a drink in his face at a wine bar uptown. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But what stayed with me most was that silence from Celeste. She didn't deny it. Didn't confront Julian. Didn't message me back. Because deep down, I think she always left that door open for him. Maybe she thought of me as the steady choice, the one you marry when you're tired of chasing excitement. Reliable, silent, dependable. Like drywall. Like Wi-Fi. Always there. Never thanked. Until it wasn't. I didn't need her to admit it. Her inaction was her confession. This wasn't a breakup. Not yet. But it was a shift. A slow rotation of power. I wasn't orbiting her world anymore. She could keep her silence. I had found my voice. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when the truth is no longer yours alone. After I posted the invoice photo with the caption, "For the family who couldn't find me a seat," I figured it would draw a handful of comments. Maybe some quiet nods. A few polite messages from people who knew me well enough to recognize I'd finally spoken up. I didn't expect it to catch fire. But that's the thing about silence. Once it breaks, it echoes. By the end of the day, I had over 600 comments, twice as many likes, and a dozen direct messages, all from people I hadn't seen or heard from in years. Vendors, old clients, a few mutual friends from Celeste's side. Some I barely remembered, but they remembered me. A guy named Arjun, a former wedding DJ I helped years ago when his van broke down before an event, messaged me. "Brother, you have no idea how many of us have been sidelined like that. You didn't just speak for yourself, you spoke for every person in the background. Respect." Someone else said, "You were never invisible. They just refused to look." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I stood in the margins of Celeste's family, quietly doing everything I could to be accepted. I funded projects. I fixed what they didn't even realize was broken. I showed up. I supported. And the one time I asked to be seen, really seen, I was labeled dramatic, ungrateful, or, worse, disposable. But now? Now they were forced to look. Michelle called again the next evening. "Are you sitting down?" she asked before I could even say hello. I chuckled. Always a good sign. Celeste's dad pulled out of that community sponsorship you got him. The one you pitched to your contractor alliance last spring. He said the optics were too messy. "That's ironic," I said, "because I've been cleaning up their mess for years." And get this, she went on, lowering her voice. "Celeste law firm? They had a quarterly mixer last night. You know who was supposed to be there? Julian. You know who didn't show up? Julian. Correct. Word is, one of the partners saw your post and started asking questions. Celeste tried to brush it off, but apparently someone forwarded your seating chart photo. He's radioactive now. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, she said. But people saw what you did. What you said. It's not just about a seat, Caleb. It's about how we treat people who don't demand attention but deserve respect. There was a pause, and then she added, it's making a lot of folks rethink some things. After we hung up, I scrolled through the rest of the messages. Some were from people I didn't even know personally, friends of friends, mutuals of vendors, a few who had only heard about the wedding exit through the grapevine. One message read, I always thought you were too quiet for that family. Glad you finally made noise. Another, my husband showed me your post. He said, that's the kind of man who's been underestimated for too long. I just wanted you to know someone out here sees you. I'd never felt this kind of validation before, not from Celeste, not from her parents, not from the world I'd been orbiting. And strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like something had finally balanced out inside me. I looked at the framed photo of Celeste and me from our second anniversary sitting on my bookshelf. We were at a vineyard that day too, different one, less glamorous. She wore a red dress, and I had on that same gray suit I wore to Danielle's wedding. Back then, we laughed without pretense. She leaned into me. Her smile was real. That version of us felt like a different lifetime. Now she was silent. Still hadn't replied to the seating chart. Still hadn't acknowledged the post. But I knew she'd seen it. Everyone had. And for once, the silence wasn't mine. I didn't need to make her apologize publicly. I didn't want revenge. What I wanted was unfolding already, not in some explosive confrontation, but in quiet reckonings. Reputations shifting. Truths being whispered in rooms I no longer entered. Doors closing behind me while others opened in places I'd never thought to look. The next day, I got a message from a wedding planner I'd worked with 3 years ago. Sasha, hey Caleb. Just saw your post. Brutal but honest. I've got a client flying in from Chicago for a wedding next month, and they're looking for someone to consult on venue lighting and vendor strategy. Thought of you immediately. Interested? I stared at her message for a long moment. Consultant. Not contractor. Not backup. Consultant. I typed back. Let's talk. Because maybe this wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning of reclaiming the things I'd buried under years of polite silence. My voice. My value. My name. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to invite me to the table. I was building my own. She knocked once. Firm. Just enough force to let me know it was her before I even opened the door. It had been over a week since I walked out of Danielle's wedding. A week of viral posts, whispered apologies, quiet praise from strangers, and louder silence from the people who once claimed me as family. I hadn't heard from Celeste directly since her one-line text, but now she was standing on the other side of my apartment door. I opened it slowly, finding her in that familiar posture. Shoulders back, spine too straight, like she was bracing for a courtroom instead of a conversation. She wore black slacks and a beige trench, perfectly pressed, perfectly composed, like she was ready to be the reasonable one in whatever argument she thought we were about to have. She didn't say hello. You didn't have to make a scene, she said, brushing past me like she still lived here. You embarrassed us. I let the words hang in the air for a beat. Us. There it was again, that automatic alignment with her family, like I was the outsider who had crossed a line, not a husband who had finally hit his limit. She stood in the center of my living room, arms crossed, surveying the space like it had changed without her permission. Maybe it had. Maybe I had. You done? I asked calmly. She rolled her eyes. Don't be like that, Caleb. I tilted my head. Like what? Petty. Passive-aggressive. Posting invoices online. Really? You mean the invoice I paid? I said. The one no one thanked me for? The one that lit up your sister's wedding while I sat next to a trash bin? Her jaw tightened. Did I sit you next to Julian? You didn't move me from beside him, either. It wasn't my job to coordinate the seating. But it was your job to be my wife, I said, sharper now. To see me. To speak up when your family treated me like the help. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd break. That she'd drop the armor. Instead, she folded her arms tighter. You're reading into it, she said. I reached into the drawer beside the kitchen and pulled out the printed seating chart. Slid it across the counter. Then read this. She stepped forward reluctantly and scanned the sheet. Her eyes landed on the label. Extra guest, Caleb Spouse. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then looked away like it stung more than she expected. I didn't know, she said, her voice smaller now. I didn't realize it would hurt you that much. That much. The phrase dropped like a stone between us. This wasn't just about a seat, I said. It was about years of being treated like a footnote in your life. Like someone who should be grateful just to be invited. She started, then stopped. For the first time since she walked in, she didn't have a defense ready. No file folder of excuses. No tidy closure. She looked around the apartment, as if searching for something familiar, something that could tether her back to what we used to be. Her eyes landed on the envelope on my coffee table. You didn't give it to her? She asked. No. You were going to? Yeah, I said quietly. Before I realized I was just a line item on her budget sheet. She looked back at me, and her face softened, not quite regret, not quite sadness, just a flicker of realization. The kind that comes too late to save anything. I don't know how we got here, she murmured. We didn't get here, Celeste, I said. You brought me here. One shrug at a time. One silence at a time. One dinner where you let your mother call me the contractor without correcting her. I didn't think it mattered. I laughed bitterly. It mattered to me. She sat on the edge of the couch, and for a moment, we were quiet. The room wasn't big, but it felt vast then. Like the space between us had turned into something physical, something impossible to cross. She finally looked up. So what happens now? I shook my head. You tell me. I stopped guessing where I stood in your life the moment I saw my name beside a trash bin. She swallowed hard. You're angry. I was, I said. No? I'm just done pretending I'm okay being invisible. She nodded slowly. My dad wrote you a letter. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. She reached into her purse and handed it to me. Thick envelope. Gold trim. Of course. I opened it after she left. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. You've made things harder for Celeste. Be careful what you burn. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I smiled. Because I hadn't burned anything. I just stopped rebuilding bridges no one ever intended to cross. Some things don't fall apart. They fall into place. Slowly, quietly. One shift at a time. After Celeste left my apartment that night, I didn't expect another knock at the door. She didn't come back. She didn't text. And strangely, I didn't feel the need to chase closure. I'd already lived the version of myself that waited for her to understand. That man had been patient, generous, loyal to a fault. But he had also been invisible. And I'd buried him at Danielle's wedding. Weeks passed. There was no explosion. No headline divorce. No theatrical goodbye with tears and suitcase slamming. We just separated. Quietly. Deliberately. A signed document filed between the silence we'd let grow for years. She moved back into her parents' guest house for a while. That told me everything I needed to know. They took her back without hesitation, not because they loved her more, but because I was no longer useful. The man who fixed everything had finally stopped showing up with a wrench and a smile. And once I wasn't building their empire in the background, they didn't care if I stayed part of the story. No one from the Monroe side reached out. Not her mother. Not her father. Not Danielle, who still hadn't gotten her wedding album. I heard she finally paid full price for the lighting setup I was supposed to cover. I almost felt bad, almost. But then I remembered the folding chair. Funny how the absence of conflict can still feel like clarity. Meanwhile, my phone stayed busy, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't filled with demands or quiet desperation. It was opportunity. The viral post hadn't just earned sympathy, it earned respect. Vendors started messaging me for advice. Planners asked if I could speak to their teams about how to handle high-end clients with low-end gratitude. Even a local business podcast invited me to talk about quiet professionalism and how people like me get erased in events we help build. But what stuck with me most was the offer from Breyer and Bloom, a premium wedding consulting group that managed elite venues across the East Coast. We're restructuring our vendor relations program, the email read, and we want you to lead it. Not as a contractor, as a consultant. I met with them in a minimalist downtown office overlooking the skyline. Their director, a woman named Janice, didn't sugarcoat anything. You've earned the trust of people we've never been able to reach, she said. Not just because of what you do, but how you carry yourself. Vendors respect you. Clients listen to you. And, apparently, so does the internet. I accepted the position on the spot. It wasn't about revenge. It was about realignment. For once, I wasn't being asked to play the background. I was being invited to design the foundation. As the weeks turned into months, things started to feel lighter. I moved into a new place, a fixer-upper on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it had good bones and a yard just big enough for weekend barbecues. I renovated it myself, room by room, wiring the lights, repainting the walls, replacing outdated switches with hands that had always been skilled but finally felt proud. And somewhere in between those late-night Home Depot runs and quiet Sunday mornings, I found something better than closure, purpose. Michelle stayed in touch. Regularly. She was the only one from Celeste's side who ever called just to check in, not for gossip, not for drama, but because she genuinely wanted to know how I was doing. "You were never the problem, Caleb," she told me once over coffee. "You were just too polite to make noise." "I'm not anymore," I said. She smiled. I noticed. One afternoon, she invited me to her son's birthday party, a backyard bash with plastic tables, superhero balloons, and way too many juice boxes. I brought a lighting rig for the bounce house just because I could. Her husband shook my hand like I was family. There was no folding chair, just a spot on the patio, next to the grill, with a cold drink and a warm plate. I realized then that family isn't who you're born into. It's who makes room for you, who pulls up a chair without needing to be asked, who doesn't care what your business card says, just whether you show up and how you treat the people around you. That day, someone's grandmother leaned in and whispered, "You're the Caleb, right? The one from the wedding post?" I nodded, slightly amused. She patted my arm. "Good for you, honey." Took guts to walk away. I looked around the yard, kids laughing, music playing, friends I hadn't known I'd make. No formal wear. No chandeliers. No false smiles. Just people. Real people. I raised my cup toward Michelle across the lawn. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not for what I could offer, but for who I was when I finally stopped hiding. It had been 11 months since I walked away from Danielle's wedding, and I still hadn't spent the check in that envelope. It sat tucked away in the back of a drawer in my new home, right next to a stack of folded work shirts and a half-empty box of light bulbs. Every time I opened that drawer to grab something practical, it peeked out like a quiet reminder of who I used to be, of what I almost gave away for the illusion of inclusion. And now? Now I barely thought about it. The backyard smelled like charcoal and fresh-cut grass. The grill hissed behind me, chicken sizzling over low flames, while laughter drifted from the patio where friends leaned against folding chairs, not because there was no room, but because they were comfortable enough to be themselves. No tuxedos. No string quartets. No stage perfection. Just a warm spring afternoon, a Bluetooth speaker playing Otis Redding in the background, and people I didn't have to perform for. I was hosting. Not just a cookout, not just a birthday or some forced holiday gathering. This was my own kind of celebration. A year of clarity. A year of choosing myself. And more than anything, a year of finally learning what belonging felt like when it wasn't a performance or a purchase. Michelle brought a homemade peach cobbler. Her husband manned the core hole boards like a seasoned referee. Their son ran barefoot across the lawn, chasing bubbles with a plastic sword. It felt simple. Easy. And for a man who'd spent too long straining under the weight of forced politeness and quiet erasure, this was paradise. I flipped a burger and looked around, taking it all in. My friends, people from work, from old gigs, vendors I used to subcontract with, mingled with real smiles. Not a single one of them asked me what Celeste was doing now. Not a single one mentioned the wedding, the post, or her father's warning letter. Not because they'd forgotten, but because they knew I'd moved on. They respected the silence I now chose, not the silence I used to suffer through. Someone tapped a glass with a spoon. It was James, a former lighting vendor who'd become one of my closest friends over the last few months. He stood up with a drink in hand, holding it above his head. All right, he called out. "Before we all slip into food comas, I need to say something." The chatter quieted, just enough for his voice to carry. He pointed at me with a grin. "To the man who reminded us that real family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who shows up, who stands up, and who refuses to sit in a chair he never should have been put in to begin with." There were a few laughs, a few nods, but what followed was unexpected. Everyone raised their cups. "To Caleb," James said, the quiet man who made the loudest statement of the year. And just like that, glasses clinked, and voices joined in unison. "To Caleb." I didn't know what to say. I felt that familiar warmth rise in my chest, the one that used to come with shame, embarrassment, the feeling of being on display for the wrong reasons. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a spotlight. It was recognition. Mutual, kind, earned. I raised my cup too, and with a small smile said, "Thank you." I didn't walk out that day looking for applause. I just finally stood up. Someone clapped. Someone else yelled, "Damn right." And then the music kicked back up. Later, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the yard, I slipped back inside for a breath of quiet. The drawer called to me, not urgently, just curiously. I opened it and looked at the envelope again. Still sealed, still untouched. I picked it up and sat on the edge of my bed, running my fingers over the embossed lettering. $5,000. More than a number. It was the last piece of myself I'd been willing to give to a family that saw me as a transaction. I could cash it, donate it, burn it, but I didn't need to do any of that. I slid it back into the drawer, not as a wound, but as a monument. Not of betrayal, but of growth. It wasn't a reminder of pain anymore. It was proof. Proof that I once believed in people who never truly saw me. And proof that when I finally saw myself, really saw myself, I chose to walk away. Outside, someone called my name. I stood, glanced around my home one more time, and headed back into the backyard light. Not for applause, not for approval, just to sit at the table I built. One seat, no folding chairs, only room for those who see me, exactly as I am.